you want solutions, you must focus your mind. Introducing your host, Mason Hargrave.
Welcome to the first episode of Solutions with Mason Hargrave. I, of course, am your host, Mason Hargrave, and with me today is Professor Marcelo Magnasco, who happens to be my PhD advisor here at the Rockefeller University and has studied a large range of topics from mathematics to biology. And so we're just going to hop into a little bit of that today and then discuss kind of this problem-solving method in general and the art of problem-solving, as is the plan to do for all future episodes of Solutions. So without further ado, hey, Marcelo.
Hello, how are you?
Doing all right.
How does this lovely winter morning find you?
The snow's melting.
Snow's melting.
Starting to go away.
Yeah.
And starting to see the ground again.
There's more coming tomorrow.
Is there?
Yeah.
Oh, fun. Is this normal for New York?
It used to be normal. Okay, this last snowstorm was the first time I saw the streets the way they used to be like 10, 15 years ago. Okay, we had a really warm spell in the last few years.
Yeah. Is that there was a big slurry last year? Did you see that?
Yeah.
What's that caused by? Do you know?
The slurry?
Yeah, like those types of like sudden storms.
Yeah. So you mean the slurry on the floor on the?
Oh, no, like there was a sudden winter storm last year.
Yeah. I don't know particularly. There's some.
Well, I'll ask you something that you definitely know about, which is I'm pulling off my list here,
Okay.
which is one thing that you're really well known for. In fact, maybe your highest cited paper is on thermal ratchets.
Okay.
So, what is a thermal ratchet?
So,
Even though I know they don't exist, which you kind of proved, but
no, they exist. They just can't beat the second law.
I see. Okay, good.
So yeah, you're bringing me. I have to bring all of these stories back from my backup tape. These were going back to '93.
Sorry, I know this isn't stored in the. This is a cache miss.
Yes, I have to bring all of that stuff back. So back in the 30s, Smoluchowski tried to argue for irreversibility of microscopic processes, and this is something that has actually pretty much obsessed physicists, okay? Because it looks like if you were clever enough, you would be able to make a machine that perpetually moves.
Right.
And how is it that you can never actually trick nature for long enough for that to happen? Okay, it has an interesting history.
Right.
Right. So there's all of these stories about Maxwell's demon and so on and so forth, and these shows the underpinnings of thermodynamics and what is it that we consider or not consider external agency, part of the system, and so on and so forth.
What's the? Can you outline that Maxwell's demon thought experiment real quick, just so people at home kind of know what that is?
So Maxwell argued. Okay, so let's establish first that we remember that heat is the motion of molecules.
Right.
And temperature is the average kinetic energy of those molecules. And the more kinetic energy they have, the more temperature there is. So the laws of the thermodynamics in their aggregate tell you that when you put thermal reservoirs in contact, okay, their temperatures will try to equilibrate.
In fact, temperature is kind of defined as the thing that equilibrates.
Yes, indeed. Okay, so fundamentally, that is the thing that is being, to some extent. So heat is the actual physical object being transmitted, but the driving force behind a transmission of heat is difference in temperature.
Right.
So if you have two objects at different temperatures, you put them together, they tend to equilibrate, right? So Maxwell said that if there was a sufficiently small, sufficiently agile being with sufficiently good eyesight, okay, sitting at a little hole between two thermos containers containing the same kind of molecule but at different temperatures, he could see whenever a very, very fast molecule, let's say for just to keep our coordinate system straight, that high temperature is on the right and low temperature is on the left.
Right.
So all the molecules on the right are, moving faster on average than the molecules on the left.
Right.
However, this is an average.
Right.
And the distribution of their speeds is Gaussian.
Right.
So it may happen that a sufficiently slow molecule on the right, okay, or a molecule that is, slow enough, approaches the little door where this demon is sitting. He sees it coming. He says, it's slow enough. I'll let it through. So he lets a molecule that moves very slowly. And quite by chance, of course, you may have a very fast-moving molecule on the left, okay? It's faster than the rest. And as it comes to the door, the demon says, okay, I'll let this one through.
Right.
And then what happens is that by choosing to let slow molecules from the right and fast molecules from the left go through this pore, which is essentially this regulated opening where this being is sitting there making decisions. You are transmitting heat from the left to the right, thereby making the left side even colder and the right side even hotter.
Essentially, the demon allows the second law of thermodynamics
to be violated. So you could indeed even start from a situation of equilibrium where the two gases are the same temperature,
right? And
then by choosing to only left fast molecules from the left and right molecules from the right, you would indeed create a temperature gradient where there was none before.
And so from a temperature gradient, you can derive energy. And then you say, I can use that energy to ride a motor. Yes. And now you just got something from nothing. That demon gave you energy.
So the demon's decisions gave you energy.
Right. And the decisions is the key part.
The decisions is the key part. So after Maxwell, who put this as an example, he didn't intend, it's clear from reading the whole context, that he didn't intend to say that the laws of thermodynamics would be violated.
Right.
He intended to say that if somebody's there making decisions and rearranging things, that something can eventually be translated into some energy.
Right.
But the agency of the demon is what's inputting energy into the system in such a way. And the question is, how much is the agency of the demons worth? Right. So then came a great deal of speculation because, of course, as you can imagine, all sorts of crackpots, try to come up with ideas for how to break the second law using sufficiently small and agile demons of their devising.
We have a joke at UC Santa Cruz. I wonder if it's common. Do you ever talk about green ink letters or purple ink letters?
No.
Oh, this must be a Santa Cruz phenomenon. A lot of the physics department at Santa Cruz always joked about green, or I can't remember if it was green or purple ink letters. The idea was that they were letters written by kind of psychonauts from Santa Cruz who had taken sufficient psychedelics to convince themselves that they understood the mysteries of the universe and that they just had to get a physicist on board with the idea, and then they would be the next Einstein. And so they would always be written purple ink or green ink, some unconventional color.
They given us a break in physics, and now they are arguing other things about vaccines or whatever.
Right, exactly.
So they moved on through greener pastures. But it used to be the case that they really had it in for the second law of thermodynamics, because nobody likes to be forbidden.
Mm-hmm.
So the laws of thermodynamics have been, said that you can't win at this game.
Right.
It's the first law, and the second law says you can't even break even. Right. You're always going to lose.
Yeah, and anytime you say no, this can't happen, you're bound to find people who try to make their career off of proving that indeed it can.
That's indeed what happens. Okay, and the constructions get very elaborate. Okay, so you get to have people having devised something like, let's say, you have a planet. And in the planet, okay, you have a dark side and a bright side, and then you have particles bouncing differently on either side of the atmosphere, and it ends up self-propelling.
Right.
And, it's like, and if you have to sit down and actually do all the calculations to show that these elaborate constructions don't work, it's a lot of time.
It's a lot of time, and you have to do that again every time someone comes up with a new device.
Yes.
And this is a device called the Gish Gallop, where someone comes up with 1,000 things, and it takes more time to prove that they don't work than it would to prove that they do work.
So
they don't work.
So what happened is that at the next stage, people try to remove the demon.
Right.
Okay, so and then just leave it to an abstract measurement of decision. And so the next major hit was Leo Szilard, who eventually will become a major figure in biological physics. Okay, but originally was a mathematical physicist. Okay, considering these kind of problems. And Leo Szilard make a simple construction in which you have a cylinder, okay, and you have a movable partition, and you have a gas consisting of one single molecule.
Right.
Because if the idea of being able to violate the second law by using the discreteness of the atoms, okay, is to be countenanced, okay, we should go all the way down to having one atom and be done with it. Right? So he has a cylinder and he has a partition in the middle, and there is one single atom bouncing around, okay, and obviously can only be on one side of the partition.
Right.
And so when it's on the right side of the partition, you can slowly expand this one atom gas and get energy out of that.
You expand it by heating it?
When you expand it, it adiabatically cools. So when you expand...
you expand the chamber. I'm sorry.
You expand the chamber.
Got it.
Yeah. You expand the chamber, okay, and then as you expand the chamber, it adiabatically cools, but you get one of the adiabatic expansion lines in a little thermal machine, and you get some energy. Then it doesn't take any energy or very little energy if you have sufficiently good design and lubrication to take that partition out, go out through the outside, okay, so not interfering with the molecule, and plug it right back in the middle.
Right.
And when you plug it right back in the middle, now the molecule will be either on the right or on the left.
Well, that must have been a fun contraption to build.
Well, I don't think...
difficult contraption to build. But in principle, the idea makes sense.
So, and then you have to measure on which side is it.
Right.
And once you have made a measurement on which side is it, you decide now that you're going to expand it in the direction in which you gain energy. Okay, you take it out again, and you keep doing this again and again and again. So Szilard argued that the act of making this measurement, okay, which implies that you have somewhere what we would today call one bit of information about the state of the system. Somewhere you have a machine that is holding the memory that the molecule is on the right and on the left.
Right.
And you make this measurement, you set this bit to either right or left, okay, and then you proceed with your expansion, and everything else is deterministic. There's no more decisions to be made.
Right.
Right? So as you do that, you are in normal mechanics, and it's relatively easy to show that in normal mechanics you cannot violate the second law. Okay? It's during these branches and decision points, okay, that things become complicated, because the laws of mechanics were usually derived in the situation in which you are on what we call a manifold. And a manifold is a mathematical object which, like the surface of the Earth, when looked up sufficiently close to the surface, okay, looks flat. It looks like a piece of Euclidean space.
Yeah.
Okay? So things that have little branches or little juncture points, okay, are hard to deal with, okay? And you have to sit down and actually, mathematically do the sutures for it, okay?
Right.
So in any case, there was this device, and then Szilard argued, and this is historically extremely important, that the act of measuring in which side the molecule was and then setting this memory, you need to remember through the expansion process that on which side it is. It's not going to change, but you don't want to be remeasuring all the time, right? So you measure once and you keep the memory.
Right.
So what he argued is that the process of taking a bit of information and setting it to either right or left consumed exactly the same amount of energy or dissipated the same amount of energy, because it's now an irreversible process. You have whatever memory you had before, it could equally well be right or left, and now you're setting it to whatever the state is. Let's say it's right. So you're taking two possibilities and the income, and there's only one possibility at the outcome.
Right.
Okay? And that compression is a compression of a factor of 2.
I see.
While the expansion of the wall, as you're expanding the wall to get the energy from your molecule, is an expansion of a factor of 2.
Right.
Now, the laws of thermodynamics tell us that we are expanding an ideal gas by a factor of exactly 2. The amount of energy we could get as maximum, the ideal maximum energy to be harvested, is kT, where K is the Boltzmann constant of thermodynamics, T is the temperature in absolute degrees with respect to absolute 0, times the logarithm of 2.
Right.
So kT log of 2 became eventually, and there's an entire avenue of people investigating where kT log of 2, the thermodynamic value of irreversibly setting a bit, was first considered. Now, Szilard did this before there were computers with bits, so which is very, very cute.
Ridiculous.
Right? And but eventually in the era of digital computation, it became clear that we're still nowhere close to being at thermodynamic levels in consumption of energy in a computer.
Right.
But there was eventually going to be an absolute limit for the thermodynamic cost of doing computations.
Right.
And this was a very long line of research. So
the kind of takeaway just being that the reason, the resolution to Maxwell's demon is that the demon, to make decisions, had to carry out computations which cost the same or more energy than does the actual amount of energy that can be harvested from the temperature gradient it establishes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So notice that brought the idea that there are underlying physical laws of computation and information into the foreground.
Right.
Literally 20 or 30 years before Claude Shannon derived the theory of information.
Right.
So the idea that there is a physicality to information, and that that the contraction of a gas and the setting of the state of a bit could be put on an equal footing at the ultra microscopic level. That's the germ of that is right there.
Right.
Now, at that time, Smoluchowski, very, very famous foundational physicist in the mathematical physics of thermal theory, went for this and I would like to tell my audience that, our audience, that I am flying blind here. I wasn't told I would be talking about this, so I have no notes. I don't remember the dates, but I'm just, I'm just riffing here, right. Don't, pretty please, nobody take me to task if I forget that Smoluchowski was 32 and Szilard was 36 or something.
Right.
This is my recollection without having actually seen my notes.
Yeah.
So Smoluchowski tried to take the things further away from decisions, and then he posited the idea that if you had a little ratchet device,
right,
and you made it ultra microscopic to be in the domain in which individual atoms could hit it,
right,
you could not use these irreversible. So you know what the ratchet is, okay?
Yeah.
It's a serrated tooth. It's a serrated gear with asymmetric tooth and a little object called the dog, okay, that presses on the ratchet. And so when you try to move it forward, you lift the dog, and here there's an essential component of the system is that the dog is pressed against the ratchet teeth through a spring.
Right.
Otherwise, this thing would be flopping around and you could move equally well. No. So you're pressing against the dog, and as you move up, you go click,
right,
click, click.
This is how handcuffs close around your wrist but can't go backwards.
Yeah, so zip ties are an example of a ratchet device.
There's the tool.
So you have these. So back in the day when I was studying this, everybody knew how to wind the mechanical clock on the wrist.
Right.
Okay, and they knew that the mechanism for actually winding the clock was a ratchet. Okay, click, 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 click. Now nobody gets that reference. Okay, I mean nobody even knows what the watch is anymore.
I forgot to wear mine today. But yeah, I could have made the sound into the microphone.
So he argued that a ratchet device, okay, would not operate in the atomic domain, okay, would not be able to irreversibly. So the idea was that you could couple this ratchet device to some to some sail or something like that would try to move it, and when it moves forward it goes, and when it moves backwards it doesn't. Okay, the reference was known to those who worked in foundational things, but largely remained obscure for many, many years, until in the 60s, Richard Feynman, okay, did this, the famous Feynman lectures on physics.
Right.
Okay.
Which almost every physicist has on their bookshelf.
Yes, it's
big red set of books. You can't miss it.
Look at your professor's
office hours next time, and you'll see.
Feynman Lectures of Physics is an absolute classic. Okay, it was, as Feynman himself put it, a failed experiment in teaching. Okay, so his students claim, they loved the lectures, but they didn't really gain the capacity to solve problems from them because they were very conceptual. But the Feynman Lectures on Physics is the book that every teacher goes for to read the subject before actually teaching it themselves and actually teaching the problems. Okay, right. So it's a book for physicists who already know the subject and want a clear conceptual way to teach it. To not to teach it, to just understand what they're talking about. Right. So there's this a beautiful chapter on the Feynman Lectures on Physics called Ratchet and Paul, in which Feynman actually graphically goes through the process of explaining how the ratchet device would or would not work.
Right.
Okay. So he actually draws a little ratchet wheel with its dog in there, and it has an axle. And the axle is connected to a vans, if I recall the term, okay, the veins, actually, to a couple of veins here, okay, and he puts the axle as joining between two different compartments so that the veins and the ratchet are in different compartments that can be set to be at different temperature.
Mm-hmm.
And then he says, okay, so let's start assuming that the temperatures are the same.
Yeah.
And then he sits down and calculates the probabilities of actually being able to move one way or another. Okay. And it turns out that all those probabilities hinge upon is as you move past one tooth, okay, you have to go past the edge of the crest of the tooth before you can click on the other side.
Right.
And you have to do this against a spring.
Right.
So you're doing work against the spring.
Right.
So the height of the teeth times the spring constant, okay, gives you the height of the
gives you a certain amount of potential energy stored.
Squared over 2, okay, will give you the amount of energy that you have to be able to have in order to overcome advancement of a tooth.
Right. So for every certain amount of energy, you can buy yourself a click on the ratchet.
Yes.
Yep.
So let's say that amount of energy, you call it delta.
Sure.
Okay, so what it means is that every now and then on the veins, the number of molecules that are hitting from the clockwise side or the counterclockwise side, okay,
Right.
will be balanced, okay, because
Right.
the number of molecules is finite, the number is never exactly the same, and so at some point there will be a combination of molecules such that they have enough energy to turn the vein.
Right.
Okay, and the ratchet goes click. And then it keeps going click, click, click every now and then. And the vent will be rarer the higher the depth of the teeth or the higher the spring constant. And, according to the Boltzmann distribution, e to the minus delta over the temperature, okay? There's
Right.
a well-understood probability for an event to happen requiring an energy imbalance of delta.
Right.
So he then whimsically draws a tiny little pulley in the middle of the axle, okay, and a tiny little spring, and he says, well, maybe we can even lift a flea, okay, or some other microscopic object. We can do work.
Right. And so now we feel
And
like
then- now we feel that, this device goes one way, so we could actually get energy out of it.
Right.
And then Feynman reminds you that because there's molecules on the right and there's molecules on the left, the molecules not just hit the veins, the molecules also hit the ratchet and they hit the dog. And the probability that a combination of molecules hitting the dog, lifting the dog from the surface of the ratchet, okay, and allowing the ratchet to back ratchet, okay, and unwind, happens to be e to the minus delta over kt, exactly the same probability that it has to advance.
Right.
Therefore, the probability that the dog itself spontaneously lifts off the surface and allows the whole thing to unwind,
Right.
okay, it's exactly the same.
Right.
It won't work.
Right.
And you can sit down, and I have, in fact, okay,
Which is the paper.
write the detailed equations. No, this is another paper.
Oh, this is
okay,
a different
because
paper. This is not the paper.
This is a different paper. So you can sit down and write the detailed equations, okay, for the motion of the dog and the motion of the veins and the ratchet system and so on and so forth. Okay.
Sounds like a mechanics problem from hell.
And prove that when all is said and done, the equations that determine the motion of probabilities in probability space for the configuration, which are called the Fokker-Planck equations, okay, have a satisfied detailed balance, and the system doesn't break the laws of thermodynamics if the system is in a single temperature. Now, Feynman then outdid himself as being smart, okay. He was sometimes too smart for his own good, and he did a really back of the envelope calculation, okay, saying that if the temperature had an imbalance, okay, that then what would happen is that the ratchet could, for instance, if the molecules on the vein have more energy than the molecules on the ratchet, conceivably, you could make it advance. So when you are talking about the ratchet, what everybody thinks is intuitively that the ratchet is at zero temperature.
Right.
Right? And so if you have a reservoir at temperature T and a device at zero temperature, obviously you can get energy out of that.
Right.
Okay, the loss of the, Carnot could have told you that in the 18th century. Okay, it's not a stretch. Okay, if you count on an energy differential, you can harness the flow of energy. Okay, and get some energy out of that.
Absolutely.
So the problem is that when the energy differential is finite or small, how much energy can you get? And Feynman argues and goes through a very loose calculations, telling that it cannot exceed the Carnot efficiency for thermal engines.
Right.
Okay. So I work on this a long time after what's going to come, but nevertheless.
Right.
So.
So the question is how is this relevant to biology? Like we're getting into this, and there's a reason why this is interesting to you as a biophysicist.
Yes, indeed. So what happened was that back in 92, I was a brand new postdoc shared between here at Rockefeller University and the NEC Research Institutes in Princeton.
Those were with which individuals, by the way?
So I was a postdoc here with Mitch Feigenbaum and with Albert Liebschaber and Peter Wolf at NEC.
So all of whom, which we don't have to get all the way into, or even close to all the way into, but Feigenbaum is known, just for those at home who are at their Google, able to Google this. Feigenbaum is a Feigenbaum's constant. I think there's a really good number file video that goes through kind of what Feigenbaum's constant is and what that is. So that's already been kind of described. But this is the Mitchell Feigenbaum of Feigenbaum's constant, and then Liebschaber and Wolf of.
So Albert back then, Albert is an experimental physicist, and he was studying the motion of biological motors. Okay, so he was studying actin, myosin. These are the motors which in our muscles power our muscles and let us actually do any kind of work. And so they were doing biophysics on it. And
this is actin and myosin.
Actin and myosin, yes.
Right. Because that's what they're doing, right? They're doing a power stroke.
They're doing exactly. So they are little biological motors that are tiny. They are nanometers in length.
Right.
Okay. And they consume energy in the form of ATP molecules, and they perform work. Right. And they move things. Okay. Totally. So it soon became evident that when you have a pore in a membrane separating two compartments in a cell, and the pore lets some molecules through and not some other molecules, that we are looking at some kind of scenario looking very much like a Maxwell demon. Right. And therefore, understanding the laws of thermodynamics, in terms of Maxwell demon-like constructions, for ion channels was a very early thought. Right. Okay. For the case of motors, so a number of people were thinking, this is a little thermodynamic machine, but it's operating at room temperature, thermal noise, individual molecules subject to fluctuations. What are the laws judging this? So, in any case, I was working with in my capacity, working with Liebschaber at NEC. They were doing all these beautiful experiments, and I was asked to analyze data. So I was doing video analysis of microscopic filaments fluctuating and the like. And meanwhile, as a theorist, I was thinking, so what can I do as a theorist about this? And then what hit me was that in this domain, we did not really have a standard of comparison. Like if you're talking about macroscopic motors, you always have Carnot's engine and all of these classical constructions that tell you what the ideal efficiencies will be, and then you can then talk about whether this is efficient or not efficient. Right. And it kept bothering me that people were talking about how hugely efficient these motors work. And there was no standard of comparison. I mean, how do you know that they're efficient? How do you measure efficiency? Right. What do you measure it against? So I remembered the story of the Feynman ratchet. And then I tried to derive some number of, I tried to derive a simple models in which I wasn't having two temperatures. So people had already remarked that maybe a ratchet-like construction works, but Feynman's ratchet is a two-temperature ratchet. Right. And it wasn't very plausible to say we have two different temperatures
inside of a biological context where everything's kind of...
Well, inside a biological molecule.
Right.
So we are talking about the separation of nanometers, okay, between one side of the molecule and the other. It's not very plausible to say one side will have tens of degree Kelvin difference. Right. That's not going to work.
Right.
So, but there was something still attractive about the Ratchet construction, okay? And then I realized that what we also associate with ratchets is the careful way in which we drive them. So if you're thinking of the Feynman's thermal ratchet, the thermal part is going to the left, to the right, to the left, to the right in a completely regular fashion.
Right.
And it's driven by what we call white noise.
Right.
And if you sit down and you try to prove that, using a white noise source, okay, you can prove that the ratchet doesn't work.
Right.
However, as we know from mechanical watches and other things, anytime that you do a simple oscillation, you make the ratchet work.
Right.
So a coordinated motion, okay, will properly operate the ratchet. So the question is, if I have a driving force that oscillates in a non-white fashion, can I get energy out of that? How much energy can I get? And so on and so forth. And that's what the paper I wrote, okay, force thermal ratchets, and trying to analyze that situation from a very theoretical point of view, okay? I mean, just claiming very loose basis on biology, okay? Right. I mean, I was inspired by biology because I was, as a fact, a member of the experimental team doing the analysis of the actual biological reality, right?
Right.
But I was trying to get something like these ideal constructions like the Carnot engine, and so on and so forth.
I have to say, I become the absolute thorn in the side of the Rockefeller PhD program, because whenever I see a gradient established, whenever I see and a lot of these things, it's really interesting to watch. Like, they're always just like, oh yeah, a gradient's there. Or often the conversation starts with the gradient already established, or it starts with some complicated, some huge complicated diagram of how the gradient was established. And sometimes it'll be missing the ATP in the pathway, and it'll just be like, oh, well, this pushes this here and this pushes that there, and you end up with these really, especially in the cell biology class I took, I was the absolute pain, because I would always ask,
somebody's always paying for it, okay,
right?
And
it's the no free lunch.
It's very important to know who's paying the bill and where does it come from in biology.
And so my question is always, and it's normally there's an answer, but it's funny that isn't initially presented, which is normally the answer is, oh well, there's ATP or GTP or something, somewhere that was, as you would say, forcing the ratchet to move. So. Well, that's that question. Do you mind if we move on to something kind of more
Sure.
Move down the list? I think one thing.
Although I want to make a historical comment.
Comment,
which just to close the arc of our conversation. So it turns out that paper became, much to my surprise, okay, because I was, I thought that I was on my little corner of the world, just writing my own little theoretical paper, okay, basically to satisfy myself that there was something to be said, okay, and it, it had more repercussions than I thought it would have. And then as a result, I was, sort of assigned the duty at Physical Review Letters, which was
that's a big journal,
prestigious at the time, the touchstone paper in physics. Okay.
In fact, it's so well known that people just call it PRL. They know exactly what you're talking about.
So I started getting a steady stream of all of the correspondence on people who were trying to violate the second law of thermodynamics.
You started getting the green ink letters.
So for the better part of a year after my ratchet construction, okay, I was then spending a not inconsiderate amount of my time refuting perpetuum mobile constructions, some of which got to be clever and elaborate. Right? But once again, hiding where the source of the energy was, okay? Because it became sort of like the same game you're mentioning, okay? In biology, if you are taking the thermodynamic view, you want to know who's paying for this.
Who's
process.
paying for this?
Okay, and then when you have a self-propelling planet, okay, that is propelling because the molecules of the atmosphere bounce harder on the back than on the front, and so it keeps moving. You want to know how does this happen, or how does it equilibrate, or whatever. So in any case, at some point I had to beg off of this duty and say, pretty please, okay, I can't take this anymore.
Yeah.
Okay, it's just too much.
I've been part of a Discord community where we were discussing a lot of general relativity, and people kept trying to come up with general or even just special relativity counterexamples. And there are these elaborate things, or they're kind of you have this cylinder of this size and this cylinder of this other size, and they run at each other, and can this cylinder of this length fit into this cylinder of that length? And you put a plate at the end that breaks, and if it goes all the way through. And
there has been never there has been a great advancement in physics on the thrust of an elaborate construction.
Right.
Okay. All of the advances in physics have been a very simple, very clear thing. Okay. Then you understand what the issues are, and then you proceed.
Absolutely.
Okay. Elaborate constructions, okay, have too much freedom to hide accounting mismanagement.
Another topic of potential. Well, then we'll move on to animals, because animals are fun. So you spend a lot of your time thinking about dolphins talking to each other.
Yeah.
And maybe you could. And one interesting thing that you proposed, for instance, is, well, first of all, I should ask, how is it that dolphins communicate? What's the modality of communication? Just like.
Well, first you have to establish that they communicate, okay, and to what level, right? So,
okay.
Every being, okay, from the lowliest bacteria up to the philosopher. Somebody once rightly remarked that life has evolved from the bacterium to the philosopher, says the philosopher, and so everything in that range, okay, communicates. Bacteria communicate their quorum, they emit signals, okay, just to do quantum sensing and synchronize themselves, and all sorts of stuff, okay? So communication is pervasive in life. The question is, how do dolphins communicate, okay? And that is a great question, okay? If you observe them, you realize that dolphins have a lot of very keen body language, right? So they have a lot of, they can sense each other.
What type of body language do you see out there?
It's the subtlety of their motion that's really striking. So, for instance, we do this study in the field in which we watch them as they are bow riding in front of the boat. Right. And as the dolphins approach, okay, they approach the boat. They like to do this because, it's fun, okay, they're surfing underwater, and apparently they like having fun, okay. Liking to have fun appears not to be, a human trait, although it's very hard to demonstrate. How do I demonstrate that dolphins like having fun? Okay?
One thing I'm really interested in is the play circuit.
So
mice have play circuits.
Yes. So
mammals have play circuits.
Absolutely. And the interesting thing is that dolphins are so outrageously efficient at what they do.
Right.
Okay. That they have a lot of free time. Okay. Right. And they spend their free time,
enjoying the fruits of life.
Yeah. Just having fun. Apparently. Okay. But this is very,
Right.
In any case, one thing that I can rigorously document is that as two dolphins approach the boat, okay, in order to join a bow riding bout, okay, they extremely often, and this we have many documented examples, they come and they go, one goes under and they cross each other. One goes under and goes over, and then they reverse themselves, and then they end up looking in the direction of the boat. So let me explain that again. Okay, imagine I'm in the boat and I'm moving in that direction.
Yeah.
Okay, so the dolphins are coming from the direction in which I'm moving.
Right.
Therefore, they can't bow right in this direction. They're going to have to turn around and go like that. Right?
I see. Yeah.
So the way they do it is actually it involves both of them. One of them goes under, one of them goes over, okay, to the other side, and then they turn and point forward.
Oh, that's fun.
We have never ever seen them hit each other except on purpose, apparently on purpose. You know, I mean, at the speed, dolphins are large.
Right.
Okay, so tursiops, which we
like 7 feet long. 10 feet long?
Dolphin, tursiops gets to be 9 feet long and 600-700 pounds. Okay, of pure muscle. Okay, it comes at you in the water. Okay, and it has an enormous amount of inertia.
Right.
How is it that it never hits you? Okay, I have had dolphins swim in front of me and literally go inches in front of my face.
Right.
Okay, they don't hit me. They don't hit each other. They have this extremely precise body control. Okay.
Right.
In a medium that is dominated by inertia, so it has all the difficulties of ice skating.
Right.
Right?
Which we won't get into.
Which we won't get into, okay? But it has all the difficulties of trying to do something that's dominated by inertia.
Right.
As a matter of fact, reproduction is tough for cetaceans.
Right.
Because they are slippery and they're moving, okay, and they're massive, so how do you align them? Right? So it's a thing, okay? It's a problem. So they have this massive amount of body language communication, okay? Presumably they have an exquisite sensitivity in the skin for currents and close contacts and whatnot. I don't think that has been proved in any degree of detail in the literature, but it's sort of evident from looking at it.
Right.
But they have this grace of motion, okay? This grace of coordinated motion that you need to really, you experience it when you see it, but then you have to try to quantitate by doing a lot of computational analysis and showing that these are not randomly moving things, right? So they have this visual, mechanical, body language thing. They definitely communicate verbally or vocally,
right?
Okay, although vocally is a misnomer, of course, because vocalization comes from voca, which means your mouth. The dolphins emit sounds using the analog of the nasal cavity that has migrated to the back, and it's the blowhole. Okay, so they have the mouth in the front and the nose in the back. Okay, but here behind the
blowhole is the nose.
The blowhole is
the nostrils.
The nostrils, and it's bilateral. Okay, and that's why it has two sides, and either side can make sound.
Right.
So they can biphonate.
Oh.
So technically, we should be calling dolphins vocalizations. We should be calling them nasalizations.
Nasalization.
But, it sounds kind of nasty. So we still talk about dolphin vocalizations, and we all know what we mean.
Right.
But there's this, in any case, they produce sounds that are either this whistle-like object, okay? Yeah. I don't know if it will be.
I'm hoping. Right.
Kind of stuff, okay? And they have these other very sharp, impulsive sounds because they also have echolocation and they sing with sound like bats.
In case it doesn't make it on the microphone, I should say Marcelo could do incredible dolphin impressions that are actually uncanny. So it's just so you know what he was doing there, in case the audio doesn't.
No, I think the audio would probably get.
I hope so.
So, in any case, so the dolphins.
So, how did you learn to do that? Just to stack on real quick. Just sitting at home. What was the first time?
I don't know. So, in any case, the thing is that they can produce these two different kinds of sounds that they mix. Okay, one of them is very specifically used in multiple contexts. Okay, so they can use these impulsive click-like sounds in order to echolocate,
right?
Okay, and they can also emit these click sounds at a very high repetition rate.
Mm-hmm.
And when that happens, okay, if the repetition rate is fast enough to be in the audible range, we hear that as some kind of a creaky door kind of sound, like, and that's one of the other sounds that we associate with the sounds of dolphins.
Right.
So yes, they use their vocalizations are extremely complex.
Right.
Okay, and for the animal kingdom. Right. And the thing that sort of bothers me about this complexity is that sometimes the vocalizations have very, very fine scale little features that I don't know if it's just an irregularity in vocal inflection, okay, or if it actually contains information on meaning. We don't know that.
And in fact, you also see. Can we talk about the accent part where it goes? Or
yeah.
Okay, and just making sure. I just don't know what's published and not published and what I can't.
No. There's there's an enormous amount of research that's on the literature.
Okay, good.
Okay? Not just from. I should mention that I've worked with this extensively together with Diana Rees.
Right.
Okay.
Who, by the way, I would eventually like to get on here.
Absolutely, I'm pretty sure that she'll be happy to. But she's at Hunter College, just literally. 400 meters, 500 meters.
Very close
from here. Okay, so we have a very close collaboration.
I know there's a Shakespeare coffee. That's one of my favorite spots.
So they have these elaborate vocalizations, and some of them have been studied. People are fascinated with dolphins and the speech.
They have accents, right? Like in some regions they go up, and some regions they go down.
They have accents. They have regional variabilities in a lot of things. I get asked this a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I cannot see that they have recognizable voices, at least not in my hands.
Right.
In fact, I don't see their vocalizations having distinct timbres from different individuals.
And you can see that if you spectrogram my voice versus your voice.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
We can trivially recognize you from me. Okay, in sonograms. Okay,
right.
Because of the different locations of the formants of our speech. Okay, which have to do with the detailed geometry of our throats. Okay, and from there because the way we make sound is we have our vocal cords, okay?
Right.
But that's just the beginning of it. The vocal cords vibrate, but then they vibrate in front of a tube that has resonances.
Right.
As the resonances are reflected back, they entrain the vibrations of the vocal cord.
Right.
Okay. So there is all this complex back and forth in which the vocal cord itself, together with the cavity and several more cavities whose geometry were constantly changing.
Right.
Okay. That gives rise to the very complex patterns of our speech.
Absolutely.
The imprint of the shape of our throats is there in the sounds we make. And we can pick it up.
Right.
And for instance, we have sexual dimorphisms in the way that we have throats of different sizes for males and females.
Right.
And that it makes male and female voices to be set apart on average.
Right.
So that, a fair proportion of male and female voices can be recognized from one another.
Totally.
We don't really see this in dolphins. Okay. I have never seen an actual recognizable difference. Okay. To the extent that we have voices in humans, okay,
right.
Between male and female dolphins, okay, they have the same frequency ranges, okay, they don't have the throats of different sizes because they are not actually speaking with the throats. They're actually making whistles with the equivalent of the nasal cavity, okay, which I would say are more akin to a horse's neigh, okay, than they are to the way we produce,
video.
So in any case, so there's this rich repertoire, and they make all sorts of sounds, okay?
Right.
But there are some sounds that recognizable come out the same.
And it should be interesting, right? That they also don't. It's not like the same way where I speak and it fills the whole room.
So their vocal emissions have directionality, just like ours do, okay?
Right.
But we communicate in a frequency range in which the acoustical shadow of our head is not that important.
Right.
Okay? But dolphins communicate at very high frequency range.
Right.
Okay? And in that frequency range, the wavelength of sound compared to their bodies is significant.
Right.
And so their vocalizations are affected. And this is an extremely important point that I don't think is fully taken care of in the field, that depending on the orientation of the dolphin to you, the vocalization sounds different. Okay.
You have a fun story to talk about how you've kind of figured that out.
No, I mean everybody. Normally, I mean, we know that this is a fact. Okay, so for instance, people have reconstructed the acoustical cone in emitting clicks. Okay, that
right.
an orca has or whales have. Okay, so we know it's a beam-forming pattern.
Right.
Okay, but then in practice, what I'm saying is, if I'm recording dolphins and I just put the microphone in the water, and if I don't see the orientation of the dolphin with respect to me, right. then I might be missing something.
Mm.
Okay,
so it's important to have both positional information and auditory information.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, I mean, if you wanted to completely reconstruct what they are saying, yes.
Right.
Okay. Yes. So this is relevant because the clicks of the collocation beam, okay, are much more narrowly focused than the whistles.
Right.
And as a result, we have recorded them numerous times, okay, by phonating clicks together with whistles.
Right.
Okay. So that we don't know, we believe that it might be a part of, the communication stream, okay, like consonants and vowels are such a part, okay, and if you're recording dolphin from the back, you don't hear the click going on together with the whistle.
Right.
Okay, so
you just hear the click.
You just hear the whistle. You just hear the whistle and not the clicks. Okay, so
the clicks are directional.
The clicks are directional. So imagine that if I were talking to you, okay, if I'm looking at you, you hear my full speech, vowels and consonants. Okay,
right.
But if I turn away, you just hear the vowels. Okay, it's So you can imagine that will result in a lot of orientation to one another. Okay, if they are actually trying to communicate.
Right.
So in any case, the solve of these complications.
So do you see this? Do you see two dolphins getting together and kind of facing each other, clicking back and forth, or is that?
You see all sorts of coordinated activity. They normally, and that's difficult. If they're close enough to one another, they should hear it.
Right. So you'll often also see them doing that, right? They'll be side by side, right on each other.
Yeah, so
sometimes making fun of you.
Dolphin is one of the few predators that actually has the eyes to the side.
Oh, interesting.
Right? So, I often imagine dolphins look at us and think that we are weird.
Right.
For having our eyes on the front.
You got made fun of by some dolphins once.
I did get made fun of dolphins.
They were teasing
me. They were teasing me. Yes, I have that on tape. They were like laughing at me. Okay, I'm not very elegant woodsman. Okay, not compared to them. Okay, nobody's elegant enough compared to them.
Absolutely.
But so these guys, I really had the impression that they were laughing at me. But it is important to know that this was a population of dolphins that was not habituated to humans.
Right.
Okay, so dolphins that are habituated to humans, okay, actually come and make fun of you, but they don't say it in front of you. Okay, then they go back.
they go back.
You know, I mean, if you look at the groups that have dolphins, people swimming with the dolphins in the Caribbean, the usual trip where they take, come swim with the dolphins. You're gonna see the dolphins actually going counterclockwise, and all of the people. I'm pretty sure they're making fun.
And
okay, look at the humans. Giant like
eyes on the front of the face. What weirdos.
Yeah, weirdos. Okay, and the fins are split in half. Okay, I mean, just imagine you have.
The fins are split? Oh, our fins! How beat up they are.
Yeah.
How do they get injured like that?
Yeah, what happened to them? Hacked.
So they also have weird teeth, right? Oh, sorry.
No, but seriously, okay,
yeah.
One of the things that interests me is that how dolphins can understand body language.
Right.
Okay, because in every aquarium in the world, they will tell you that dolphins can understand the trainer pointing at something.
Right.
They don't have arms.
Oh, right. So that wouldn't be like a naturally.
Yeah. So
it can be explained about dogs because we've trained, like we've domesticated them over a long time.
Yeah, but
we've selected for that.
It's interesting that they understand body language of humans, even though humans are so different in so many ways.
Mm.
So
that's odd. That is odd.
Yes. So
is that just beyond training? Is that beyond conditioning? Like as in.
I don't know. Okay, I don't know if it's simply the familiarity with the trainer or whatever.
Right.
Okay, but it's very clear that if you point at something, they turn around and they look at what you point.
Fascinating. There's a famous video that's gone rather viral of Diana in front of the dolphin tank.
Yeah, that appeared recently. So we had, I think that would have been Bo. Bo had the habit of actually going to the window and bunking with the forehead. Okay. I should mention at this point that that globular structure in the front of their head that people think is their forehead is actually a mass of acoustical fat that's used in an acoustical lens to actually focus sound.
Like sperm whales.
Yeah. Well, they're all cetaceans, right? Right? So they all have the same thing. The skull is swept further back, okay? So he's not actually hitting the window with his skull. He's hitting it with a soft fat structure.
Right.
Okay, so yeah, so it was funny that Bobo was trying to, hey, look at me.
Why her?
So in any case, that viral video is of my dear friend and close collaborator.
Right.
Okay.
And then another thing that was positive, I think this was between you and Jim Hudsmith. I'm not sure what, but the teeth are separated. And
no. This is not a local observation. This is somebody else who observed that, and I read it and was taken by this. Okay, but I can't remember the reference.
But I'm sure people.
It's an important observation that dolphins have equally spaced teeth.
Equally sized, equally spaced.
Yeah. Teeth, okay? A lot of them. And if you look at the dolphin mandible, okay, there's this perfectly regular array of teeth.
Right.
Okay? And it's in the literature, it's been in the literature for decades. I'm trying to remember who was the reference. I'm sorry.
If you figure it out later, on the YouTube video, I can put a little pop-up window.
Okay, put something. Yes, it will be handy.
I can edit it.
Okay, so it's been hypothesized that the regular arrangement of these teeth is actually used as an acoustical diffraction gradient.
Right.
So that there is directional sensitivity to sounds coming in the ultrasound range, because if you compute what the corresponding wavelengths of sound would be for that spacement of teeth, okay, it comes out to something like 50 kilohertz, right smack in the middle of the frequency of the recollocation beam.
Right. The width, the size of teeth implies a width it implies a wavelength for diffraction.
Exactly.
Which implies ultrasound.
Exactly. And, and given that, and I'm not sure if this is in the original of my own speculation, okay,
sometimes these things get
sometimes,
after
yes, you read something that makes you think of something and it's not clear who, well,
if you look back,
there's a paper. But what it immediately made me think of is the fact that we have this sensitivity to high frequency in our teeth. Okay, as anybody who has seen somebody scratching a blackboard nose.
Right.
Okay, there's this sensitivity to sounds in the teeth. Okay?
Right.
So yeah.
And so there's right. And then I'm trying to think. There's one other dolphin story that's interesting, which is you had a relative that was saved by a dolphin.
Yeah. So that is something that it's in the lore of dolphins. It's been known since the time of the Greek that dolphins rescue drowning humans.
Yeah. What's that about?
Well, I don't know what that is about, but I do know that remembering, this is a story of my childhood. My uncle was swept away by a riptide.
This was in La Plata?
This was in a coastal town in Argentina. Okay. So he was swept away by a riptide.
Yeah.
And then he was trying to come back to shore, but he didn't do it properly. He didn't, towards the riptide, so he was getting worse and worse, was getting tired and started having, like cramps and everything. Okay. And then all of a sudden a dolphin comes out and starts, hitting him with his head. And in the beginning, he was terrified until he sees that the dolphin is actually pushing him towards the shore. And the dolphin pushed him to the point that he could actually stand on his feet on the bottom and then just turn away and left.
Right.
And this is a behavior that caused dolphins to be so. Killing a dolphin in Athens was penalized with death because dolphins save drowning sailors. Okay, and so they were understood to be beneficial spirits. Okay, that shouldn't be killed. And I grew up knowing that this is a fact and not fiction.
Right.
Okay, my uncle was totally black and blue the next day, okay? Because you can imagine.
But saved from
drowning, okay? The dolphin is pushing.
And I know this sounds like a goofy question, but dolphins. If I'm trying to imagine, I think the word we've used before is Umwelt. So I'm imagining like the mindset of a dolphin. I'm trying, though. I probably will fail here. When they get beached, they die. Right? When they get pushed to the shore, they die.
Well, it would be very hard to push a dolphin onto the beach without its consent to some extent.
Yeah.
So beaching behavior is a behavior that's very
voluntary,
unnatural. Well, I wouldn't call it voluntary, but it has some degree of suspension of their will or something rather. Okay, and this is there's a lot of debate in the community about this.
As to whether or not they get just depressed, really.
Well, it's unclear, okay, because we see dolphins beaching themselves,
right,
in order to catch fish. Okay, right. And then they do that, and then they come back just by themselves. Okay, and
well, how do they get back once they're beaching? Not elephant seal status, but
yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, they're powerful and
they can move.
So probably they go to the level that they know. But it would be really, it would be really difficult to think that a dolphin would be catching awares of this sort of thing. Okay, I mean, right. they know their stuff.
Right.
They really know their stuff. I mean, there's So, for instance, there's this community behavior that has been established over generations. Okay, it's in the Indic Ocean. There's this community in which nobody knows exactly how it started. Okay, but there was a group of dolphins that brought a large number of fish and ended up getting the fish directly into the nets of some fishermen. Okay, and the fishermen share the fish with the dolphins. Okay, and now every year they come back.
Right.
Okay, and this is by now obviously a culturally transmitted behavior. Okay,
Right.
but by now they've been renewing the members of this thing, but they have this association in which dolphins envelope schools of fish. Okay, and they push them straight into the nets of the fishermen, and then the fishermen share with the dolphins.
Oh, that's
so
so cool.
happy. Okay, and there is this cooperative behavior for hunting. Dolphins evolve these hunting strategies everywhere. Okay, and they are absolutely fascinating to look at. Okay, so the idea that the dolphin would accidentally beach himself, okay,
It's a little far-fetched.
Is a little far-fetched. Okay,
Which
now we know that whales end up beached. Okay, and that has been correlated with tests of different sonars by the Navy and so on and so forth. So there have been huge investigations about this, and the Navy is now very conscientious about whether they actually conduct or do not conduct sonar tests. Okay,
Right.
These are animals that communicate over ranges of miles underwater. They have extremely sensitive hearing. If you damage their hearing, it could create some kind of trauma that
one of the greatest types of pain for humans is social shunning.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? The most surefire way to torture a human psychologically is to cut them off from all their friends, which is, we could probably make a lot of COVID statements based on that. But yeah, and so it's wouldn't be far-fetched to me to think that if you damaged the hearing of a whale and they were suddenly cut off from communication with their friends, that would be pretty painful.
We don't know whether it's whether there's actual pain to the structure, social pain, or a combination thereof. Okay, people have thought that in the delicate structures of the cochlea you could even have production of bubbles acoustically. Okay, that could damage the structure and cause pain. We don't know. Okay,
right.
People are actively studying, and you can probably get in touch with somebody who knows about it a lot more.
But this brings me to something that I think is really interesting. When we talk about problem solving, one of the first step of problem solving are the 4 F's, which are finding a problem, framing it such that it appears solvable, and then figuring out the solution, and then getting funding for your solution. I think you more than a lot of scientists that I know understand the power of the anecdote. And I think that I think sometimes the anecdote is underappreciated. Often in science, it's like an anecdote is immediately dismissed. Whereas, I think perhaps the difficult thing is figuring out how to find good anecdotes and use them as clues to find good problems. And if you use bad anecdotes, you're going to find bad problems. So maybe we can talk about that.
Yeah. So my own thesis advisor once remarked that the process of me coming to his office and telling him, what I was working on, which is something we did regularly, even in the case in which I was stuck in the middle of regulation, was because, as he remarked, okay, the natural state of a physicist is to be stuck.
Right.
That's the ground state. Right. And every now and then, episodically, you get unstuck, you make a lot of progress in a brief moment, and then you get stuck somewhere else.
This was Leo Kadanoff.
Yes. Who was not just good about physics, he was remarkably wise about how physicists do their job.
Right.
okay, and how do they should do their job more or less effectively. And so what he said is, my job as an advisor is to make sure that you're not stuck in something trivial that I could help you.
Right.
Right? And this assumes that you have, and this is something that works well in physics because there's such an established body of knowledge, okay, that you understand what the problems to be solved. Mm-hmm. Okay. The issue comes when you go into these interfacial disciplines, like between physics and biology, between, in my case, physics and now pathology and animal behavior. Okay. What exactly are the problems we're trying to solve? Okay. Right. I am not trying to solve the problems that animal behavior people already are solving. Okay. They know how to do that better than me. They've trained all their lives. Okay. I'm not going to just,
waltz in and beat
their own game. Okay. That's just not going to happen.
Right.
Okay. What's going to happen is that they're going to find the game just outside their fence.
Right.
Okay. And try to beat them there.
Right. If you can't beat the game that exists, make a new game.
But that's, go to an area that's unexplored. Okay.
Right.
And in that kind of an area, finding your bearings is difficult. And that's where I think anecdotes are important. So this is in the context, you might want to say it again for our audience, that there's a very popular saying in science that data is not the plural of anecdote. Right? So we say, okay, you have some anecdotal observations, okay, that does not amount to a well-constructed plan.
Right.
And that's absolutely correct.
Absolutely.
Okay. But on the other hand, okay, anecdotes tell you what you should be looking at, okay, and how to construct the study.
Right.
So they should be suggesting to you, hey, pay attention to this. Okay. So single occurrences of things, okay, are rather important to look at, okay?
Right.
And in particular in my work with dolphins, okay, in the few years I've been looking at them, okay, so many things have happened only once.
Right.
That, and therefore are strictly speaking anecdotes that I don't know what to make of that, okay? But it's very, very clear that there's a lot we don't know or understand about their world, about their perception of the world, the way they live, okay? That's extremely important. And this ties back to communication, okay? Coming back to the original subject you were pointing out, because when you communicate, you want to communicate your predicament.
Right.
You want to communicate your reality. And therefore, that communication has to do with how you see the world, okay? I mean, it's intrinsically tied to it, okay? You can't communicate, okay? I mean, you can't expect a dolphin to communicate things that a human would necessarily comprehend, okay? Because it's very hard to imagine what it would be to be an echolocating being with eyes on your side, okay, that can point independently of each other, okay?
Right. This is the Umwelt idea, right?
Yes. So it's a very different, and
it's Umwelt, UMVELT?
Yeah.
Just in case people are Googling.
So I have these interesting. I did this interesting exercise once. There is this list of words called the Swedish List.
Yeah.
Okay, that is used by linguists to assess phylogenetic distance between different languages.
Right.
Okay, and it has to do with the idea that very commonly used words evolve at different speeds from words that are uncommon. Okay, and that therefore you should look at certain classes of words. And when Swedish compiled the list of the most used words, he has a list of 100 words that you can look up in Wikipedia.
Right.
And I went through them one by one to notice that less than half are applicable to a dolphin.
Right. So what are some good examples?
Drinking. Dolphins don't drink. Dolphins only get their water from the fresh water in the flesh of the fish they eat.
Right.
They do not drink because there is no fresh water in their environment.
Right. Now, of course, certain languages, and I know this isn't supposed to be a counterexample by any means, but certain I know in Bengali they use the same word for eat and drink. So it's kind of tomar. Is instead tomar can you say I tomar? You would only say tomar for drinking.
Yeah.
So never mind. So it's not, but it's like consuming water and consuming food is the same thing. So they might have an idea. They would probably have a word for consume.
Yeah, so obviously they will know what to eat is, okay, but for instance, what is a path?
Oh yeah, this one you walk on. If you're a 3D, essentially flying creature, like a dolphin.
So what is a path? What's eating? Fire, ashes, all of these words are in the Swedish List.
Fire,
Fire is a very
not
common.
gonna come up.
Ashes is a very common word.
Not gonna come up.
Not gonna come up, okay, they've never seen ashes,
Yeah.
okay, or the result of fire, okay, rain. What is rain to dolphin? Okay, something that happens up there in the surface,
Yeah.
right? That you hear from underneath, okay, it's like,
It wouldn't be nearly as important to a dolphin if they were.
Well, I don't know, it's like rain on a rooftop, okay, but, so you have all of these things of the world, okay, that the more you think about it, you realize how incredibly different it is, okay? They don't have a house.
Right.
They don't sleep in nests, okay?
Right.
They are just there, okay?
They just sleep float, like.
Yes, they sleep, so they have a hemispheric sleep in which only one half of the brain sleeps at a time, and they take turns. Because of course
they
are voluntary. Well,
I could use that for grad school.
Well, don't you? So it's been known in humans in situations of stress.
Yeah,
and it's been documented in birds too.
Humans have done this. It's been documented in humans.
It's well known. People in the trenches in World War I, okay, were seen, okay, sleeping with one half and the other half awake. Okay, and the extreme stress, okay, they can do that. So it's easier for dolphins because they have a smaller corpus callosum by comparison.
Sleep with one eye open is actually.
Yeah, so it's an expression, right? So dolphins do this regularly because they are voluntary breathers. So they cannot breathe if they don't do it by choice, okay? Right. Because obviously it would be deadly to take a gasp underwater.
Right.
So they're voluntary breathers, and if they sleep and that's one of the problems. If you need to do a major operation on a dolphin, you can't anesthetize.
Because they'll suffocate.
They suffocate, okay? You have to intubate them, okay? Or else you cannot, if they have some massive internal hemorrhage or anything, it's very, very, very hard to do.
Right.
So they sleep with one side, okay? And they are just, floating around near the surface, okay? They can't be lying on the bottom to sleep.
Right.
Because they would die.
Totally.
Right? So they have to be on the surface and therefore at the mercy of currents. So by definition, they don't have a place where they live. They don't have a home. They don't have a house. Okay. They don't sit.
So all these words that we kind of rely on as our top 100 most famous,
what this tells you is that if we ever are going to understand the speech, okay, we need to understand the world.
Right.
Okay. Because we are not going to be able to mechanically translate.
Very Hegelian.
Yeah.
So how are we doing on time?
I don't know how we're going on time. It's 12:09. I think we've
hit our point.
Okay.
I think that was that.
So do we want to wrap it up in some fashion, or you just did it?
Well, I think basically,
should we thank
we should thank our audience, I suppose. I guess I haven't thought about this far. How to end the episode.
Yeah, how to end the episode. Okay.
So you go ahead.
So, I would like to thank everybody who's been patiently listening to this point.
Yeah.
Okay. We clearly like chatting and the sound of our voices. Okay. happy if you actually made it this far.
Yep.
Okay, and I wish you the best of lucks with your interviews and your episodes.
Yeah, thank you for being my first guest. Getting the first guest is, has to be the hardest thing, and I really appreciate you supporting me and trying to move this endeavor forward.
It was a pleasure.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you.